Okay, we're gonna try putting this here because that's where it's supposed to go. But in today's video, we are going to learn how to make a kennel quilt. And a kennel quilt is exactly what it sounds like. It's gonna be a little mini, small little quilt that can go in a small sized kennel. Now, I have figured out on myself that I like to do small projects even when it comes to quilting. I just really like to do something that doesn't take one, a lot of space, and two, something that I can get done fairly quickly and go on to the next thing. It's just something that I've noticed. I've tried to do large projects and it just doesn't always work out that way. But what I had been doing was I had been researching online about like either quilt donations, things like that, because I know that I can make a bunch of quilts, but I just don't have enough people to be like, oh, I'm gonna give this person a quilt. I've pretty much given everybody a quilt that I can, almost. I mean, there may be like two people. Anyway, I was researching quilt donations and things like that, and I came across this group on Facebook called Kennel Quilts. And it was intriguing to me because we have two fur babies of our own, two cats. They're both senior kitties that are, yeah, they've never gotten along the whole time that they've been together. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. But yeah, I found kennel quilts and I was like, oh, okay. So they're small, they're 12 by 18, and they can be donated to different groups that are in like a network through Pet Finder. I believe it's Pet Finder is the website. So I joined the group, I was looking at things. And of course, everybody knows about the wildfires that happened a few months ago, or I guess a month ago. Dang. Anyway, everybody knows about all of that went down because of the wildfires and everything that went down in California and everywhere. There were a lot of pets that were displaced. People had to leave them behind, things like that. And there were a lot of the shelters out there that had an influx of pets that came in. So I was like, this would probably be a good time for me to go ahead and just go for it. So what I did was they have a set of parameters that you have to follow, like quilting, cotton, and things like this. And you have to use cotton batting and yada yada, and the sizing and everything. And there's a little form that you can fill out to go along with your quilts. So I read that, downloaded it. I downloaded the little form that goes with it, and I made 6 of them at first. I messaged the page and I said, hey, I've got 6 quilts. I would love to donate to somewhere in California to help with the displacement of the pets out there. And they were like, oh, welcome to the team, yada, yada, yada. So since then, I have donated 3 more times. And this last time, I donated 8 quilts. And so it feels really good just being able to help. Because pets, I mean, they don't know what's going on. They don't know what's happening. They don't know what's going on or where their family is. So it feels good to help. But in this video today, that is my long intro, just to say that I'm going to show you how I made some of my first kennel quilts using these panels of fabric. I believe I've got like one more left. Hold on. I honestly didn't know if I had any more left, but I have one more of these angel panels, and this was fabric that I got from a little lady that messaged me after one of my in-person shows and said, oh, you want some fabric? Yeah, I'll take some fabric. So I had these panels, I cut them out, and I just thought that it would be appropriate for the kennel quilts because it's like angels looking over animals. So I'll show you how I use these panels to make some quilts. And yeah, so grab your sewing tools and we shall get right into it. All right, so first off, you are going to gather all of your sewing tools. Now, I need to get better about doing this at the beginning of all my videos, but these are the tools that I'm going to use: cutting tools, scissors, rulers, pins, and also clips, because the clips are One of the best things ever, and they're very easy. But once you've gathered your tools, then you're going to gather your fabric. Now, like I was saying before, there was this fabric that had these angel panels on it, and I was like, okay, I think that this is going to work out pretty awesome, along with this other angel fabric that was going to go on the backing. Now, these panels were not quite big enough for me to use on the kennel quilt, so I decided that I needed to go ahead and make them bigger by adding some strips of scrap fabric. Now, I started out doing this one way because I was like, this was in the beginning of my journey with the kennel quilt, but what I was going to do was cut my batting to size and then quilt everything on it like that. But then I actually changed my method halfway in. But the finished size for your kennel quilt is going to be 12 inches by 18 inches. And this piece of batting is quite a bit bigger because my working size with all the seam allowances and everything was about 12 and a half by 18 and a half. So here, like I said, I was going to start trimming it down at first and then going along and sewing it to the batting, but I decided to trim it down towards the end. So that's why I'm only cutting the one side of the batting. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to take your panel, which this angel panel is what I'm going to be working off of, and I decided to square it off. Now, I did not get perfect with this. I just cut the selvage off and then kind of worked with that because it looked fairly even to me. Once I cut the selvage off and decided, yeah, this will work, I took my piece of batting and I went ahead and placed it kind of in the middle. Again, since I didn't trim everything at the beginning, I've got a little leeway to kind of play around with things. But I just kind of eyeballed it and centered it in the middle of my batting. Now, this batting that I'm using is 100% cotton, and there are specifics for the quilt donations that you need to pay attention to if you do want to donate in the name of Kennel Quilts. But here you can see that the angel panel, is quite a bit smaller than I need for the finished quilt. So I grabbed some scrap fabric from my stash that I felt like would kind of go along with the motif. And what's fun about these quilts is that you can basically do any sort of pattern that you want. The kennelquilts.com site actually has some free patterns that you can use if you need some inspiration or ideas. But for this particular one, I'm going to use this purple shaped fabric here to make the panel wider, and then we'll have to add some fabric on the ends to make it longer so that we make sure that we can fully accommodate that 12 by 18 finished size for the quilt. But I ended up cutting this piece of scrap fabric absolutely perfectly. I didn't even measure anything. I just kind of eyeballed it. I guess my eyeballs are getting pretty good, huh? So then I went ahead and cut another piece of this scrap fabric the exact same size. And when I unrolled it, I noticed that there were like some notches in it. I guess that was from the previous owner, had some projects they were doing. So I needed to make sure to take that into account as well. So I cut another piece of that fabric the same size and tried to miss those notches, or at least make it to where I'm going to cut them off at the end. So now to attach those pieces to our panel that we currently have, what we're going to do is we're just going to sew it directly onto the batting. We're going to make it easy peasy. So what I'm doing now is I'm lining it up on the top and bottom of the angel panel and pinning it into place. And then we're going to take it to the sewing machine and we are going to sew it directly to the batting. So it'll be a form of quilting, but we'll still add some quilting lines at the end. Go ahead and pin both sides to your panel. Now, one thing that I did notice was that there was one side of this that had a lot of strings. Went ahead and trimmed that down on one side just so that it would pin nice and evenly. And what we're going to do is we're going to take this to the machine And on both sides where they're pinned, we are going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance on our machine. Now, once you're done sewing that down, we're going to take it back to our mat and we'll go ahead and just flip those edges over. Now, what you can do is if you have your ironing station set up, you can go ahead and iron those down. I am not going to be ironing these down because I will do that later on, but now we're going to cover up these ends where the batting is showing. And I had some more of that purple fabric, but I decided that with my seam allowance, it wasn't going to be enough to cover it and to have the length that I need. So I decided to audition some different pieces, and not everything worked out. But I remembered I had this floral fabric that I also got from the same person that donated the angel panels. So there was a couple spots, even after washing, that I needed to try to avoid. So I just cut a chunk off, didn't measure anything. Again, it's it's kind of like chaos over here, but it works out in the end. I promise it does. But I cut off a chunk of this yardage that I had and auditioned it, and it seemed to work out pretty well. So what I did was I went ahead and just cut it down up to approximately the size that I needed, and squared off one of those edges to make it easier to connect to the sides of the panel. And I did the exact same thing that I did on the other purple, is just attach it to the sides to make sure that it's nice and wide. Now, once you get the sides attached, you're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance on the left hand side and the right hand side at our machine. All right, so once you're done with that, you'll go ahead and fold that over. Make sure you get all your pins out. Don't leave anything in there because that's not good. So now we are at a point to where you can square it off now if you want to. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to be laying the back side on top where the pretty sides are facing each other. And then we can go ahead and make it into a quilt that we're going to be turning this right side out at the end. But what I decided to do again was I was going to square it off at the very end because, yeah, I just wanted to be different, I guess. But this particular angel fabric was not wide enough, again, for what I needed. So I ended up taking some more of that purple because I had cut a chunk off and I already had it. Added some of that purple to the back piece, the backing, and to make it big enough. So it's kind of like a scrappy, kind of patchworky quilt, but again, it's going to get the same love from the animals regardless of what it looks like. So yeah, it's going to be nice and warm, going to give comfort to some fur babies somewhere that may be in distress. But what I did was I took a piece of that purple and just added it to the top side. Another thing too is if you have directional fabric, you just want to make sure that you pay attention to which side is up. That was something that I like to double check multiple times when I'm working with it, to make sure that the angel panel on the front and the angels on the back were all facing the right way. And now we will add that piece on top, pin it into place or clip it into place, either way. And we are going to just sew that on to the back piece with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, once you get that sewn on, now we're going to be ready to make our little sandwich. And the way that we're making our sandwich is like I was saying before. We're going to put the pretty side with the directional facing the correct way. We're going to put it facing the top piece. And we're just going to kind of eyeball it and make sure that everything's lined up. And then what we're going to do, this would actually probably be the better time for you to square things off. But yeah, every project is an adventure in fisting the land. So but yeah, what you're going to do is you're going to sew all the way around the perimeter, and you're going to leave a hole open so that you can turn everything right side out. Now, the hole that you leave open, I like to leave a pretty good gap, like probably like 6 or 7 inches. You don't have to leave that much, but I like to be able to get my whole hand in there and turn things inside out. Once you get everything sewn and trimmed up and ready to turn inside out, you make sure to get all your pins and get everything trimmed, and then we are almost done. We are almost done with this beautiful quilt that is going to, like I said, give comfort to one of our lovely fur babies that needs a little loving right about now. Now, before you do turn it inside out, you want to make sure that you do clip your corners. Clipping your corners helps ensure that there's not too much bulk and just gives you a nice crispier corner. Now, I am working on getting better with my corners. I do have a chopstick and a like paintbrush that I cut the like dried bristles off of, that I do use if I want like a super crispy corner. Sometimes I'll just use my finger. What you're gonna do is you're gonna get your finger in that corner and just kind of flip it inside out, kind of what I'm doing here. You can do your finger, or you can actually use your tool just to make sure that that corner is nice and flat. Once you get everything turned inside out and looking good, this will be a good time to where you can press things. Here's my tool that I did use to kind of poke out some of those corners that were being stubborn, because sometimes that's just what happens. But yeah, this would be a great time for you to get the iron out and give it a good press. I did not in this part, but I do implore for you to do that, because yeah, things just lay down so much better when you do actually press them. I've got to get better with that, for real. But now, like I said, we're in the home stretch. Now what we've got to do is we've got to close that opening that we turned everything right side out. So what I like to do is I like to put a bunch of clips on this, one at the end and one at the beginning of the opening, to make sure that I get everything covered. And you want to make sure that you do catch this opening when you do your final top stitch all the way around the perimeter of your quilt. And just make sure that all of that is taken into account, because I don't want to miss anything. So now once you have that clipped, you're going to go all the way around the outside of the quilt, 1/4 inch seam allowance. You're going to make sure that you close up that hole. And technically you can be done at this point because everything's squared away. But I decided to do some decorative lines just right on the edges of those panels because I just wanted it to lay down a little bit better. But essentially you're done at this point. And you can do other quilting lines, you can do like a cross or whatever you want to do, but I wanted the panel to shine, so that's why I left it as is and just did minimal quilting. But yeah, once you get your threads clipped and everything, you have you a kennel quilt that is ready to be donated. They have a list of current places that need kennel quilts listed on their website. So make sure that you check them out. You can also donate these to your local shelter if you like. And also make sure that you make one for your own fur baby because I know that they would enjoy that as well. But that is how to make a small kennel quilt. And yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions. I will see you next week with something else awesome.